Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So I think we can get started on this third session. No reason to go through the house rules again. I think this session is going to be a bit more unstructured and more discussion oriented. So I'll hand it over to Jens and Olga for the presentation.
Yes, hello. Also, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from our side. Welcome to the last day of this workshop series. Yesterday, we stopped at the fourth pillar, the metrics and the targets pillar, and we will continue there. So the agenda for today looks like this. So we will continue, as said, with climate-related metrics and targets for an entity's own operations. And we would also like to discuss that together with you. So we have prepared, so be prepared. We have quite some polls today that we want to run together with you through that. So looking forward to your feedback on that. So my colleague Olga, she will take care about the polls. Then after we have finished all the technical requirements of IPSASB ED SRS1, we will take a more wider look, and we have prepared two studies, or we will share some insights of two studies. So the first study was done by ACCA on sustainability reporting landscape in Asia and Pacific. So it's a little bit the experience that the private sector has done, has made around sustainability reporting. And we would like to share the results of that report with you, and also trying to stimulate debate what that could mean for the public sector. Then probably after then the coffee break, we will look into more the public sector, and there is one case study that was done with the City of Toronto, and also the City of Toronto has made significant experience with implementing sustainability reporting, and we would like to share a little bit some of the insights that came out of that project. Good, so let me continue now with the metrics and targets pillar of SRS1. And yesterday we have covered the metrics bit of the standard, and today we are talking about targets. So yesterday we learned how those targets can probably be measured through the metrics. But today we are learning a little bit more what needs to be disclosed in terms of targets. Good, and the first requirement would be to say what is the metric used to set the quantitative and qualitative climate-related targets to monitor the progress towards achieving the strategic goals of the entity, and any other targets it is required to meet by law or regulation, including any greenhouse gas emission targets. So that is the first requirement, and maybe just to outline that a little bit. So what could be such a metric? And such a metric could be, for example, the carbon dioxide equivalent emissions of scope 1 and scope 2 measured in tons per year. That would be your metric to measure your target. And then, of course, your target could then be, for example, to reduce the carbon dioxide equivalent emissions of scope 1 and scope 2 emission measured in tons per year. by maybe 50% by 2030 compared to the 2005 levels. So it's also important when we talk about targets to also refer back what is your baseline, what is your starting point with what you compare your target. And we will see later on in a disclosure requirements that it is necessary to also state your baseline. Good, then the second disclosure requirement is to state what is the objective of the climate related target. So that you say, for example, with that climate related target, that is the aim is to mitigate, the aim is to adapt to climate change, or it could even be to be in conformance with science-based initiatives. So that's the second one related to target. And then to outline in number 3, the scope to which the climate-related target applies. For example, whether the target applies to the entirety of the entity, or if the target only refers to a part of the entity. So to make that really clear, to what part of the entity the climate-related target relates. Good, so that's the first 3, and now let's come to the next. And as already outlined by my example, you would also have to provide the period over which the climate-related target applies. So in my example, I said, for example, until 2030. So then from that, it's clear to what period actually the target then refers to. And also, as you have seen in my example, it is necessary to refer to the base period from which the progress is measured. And what the standard then also says is that for each of the climate-related targets, you would have to report on any milestones, on any interim targets. So, and then the question is, so if the climate-related target is quantitative, then you should make clear whether that is an absolute target or whether that is an intensity target. And you might now ask, okay, what's the difference between an absolute and an intensity target? So absolute target, it has no, let's say, reference point. So for example, an absolute target would be, for example, a fixed number for emissions. So for example, regardless of the size of the entity. But with an intensity target, you set the emissions relative to some measure of activity. So that means, for example, the target could be to reduce carbon dioxide emissions per employee by 20%. So that you have a kind of a relative reference point when it comes to the intensity that you would like to achieve. Good, and next, the climate disclosure requirement related to metrics and targets is how the latest international agreements on climate change, including any jurisdictional commitments that arise from that agreement, has informed the climate-related targets. So, for example, the Paris Agreement, when you would refer to that, and any kind of application that the respective country has made for national purposes. Good, then now that is then more on the procedural side with regards to the targets. And the first requirement is then around a description of any validation process employed in setting climate-related targets and the methodology for that. So this is now more a qualitative disclosure requirement. And as the disclosure requirement says, you would have to describe how you have validated the climate-related targets. So for example, whether there has been some internal validation or external validation, so that you agreed that with any international set target, for example. Good, then the next disclosure requirements is around the entity's processes for reviewing the climate-related target. So the one side is setting the climate-related target, but also then the other issue is around when you think of that you might have to adapt also climate-related target, then the question is, what is your process for reviewing the climate-related target of your entity? Then the third one is the metrics used to monitor the progress towards reaching the climate-related targets. And fourthly, any revisions to the climate-related target and the explanation for those revisions. So when you want to revise your climate-related targets, then you would have to state that and also explain why do you revise the targets. Good, and the final and probably the most important one is then the reporting about the performance against each of the climate-related targets and an analysis of its trends or changes. So that will make transparency on how the government or the public sector entity is progressing towards the climate-related targets. Good, and now let's come to the final bit of the metrics and targets disclosure requirements. And these are now the ones, so the targets that relate specifically to greenhouse gas emissions. And so the first question is, which greenhouse gases are covered by the climate-related target? So yesterday you have learned that there is scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and you would have to state which of those scopes are actually covered by the target. Good, then with that closer disclosure requirements, I probably have to tell you a little bit the difference between gross GHG emissions and net GHG emissions. Because you would have the possibility to either remove GHG emissions or to offset GHG emissions. Offsetting, for example, you can buy carbon credits, so that then reduces your GHG emissions. And so therefore, it's necessary to outline whether your target is a gross GHG emission, so that would be before considering removals or offsets of GHG emissions, or whether that is a net target. And then the standard says if the entity discloses a net GHG emissions target, the entity is also required to separately disclose its associated gross GHG emissions target. So that would be necessary so that users can see how the gross figure looks like. Good, and then I think more or less the final one is whether the target was derived using a sectoral decarbonization approach. Good, then just some more disclosure requirements about the carbon credits. So as said, the carbon credits, they reduce your gross GHG emissions targets, and you would have to outline the extent to which and how achieving any net GHG emission target relies on the use of carbon credits. Yeah. Then next disclosure requirements is which third-party schemes will verify or certify the carbon credits. So really then for users, the interest is whether that is kind of a good approach with using certain carbon credits. And finally, you would have to state the type of carbon credit, including whether the underlying offset will be nature-based. Yeah, for example, that could be reforestation, for example, or that could be based on technological carbon reduction or removals. And that you might ask, okay, what are technological carbon removals? And that are, for example, engineered methods that pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it somewhere permanently. So that is one of the technological carbon removals. And at least based on my knowledge, all the technical developments in that area are still ongoing. Good, and final aspect is whether the underlying offset is achieved through carbon reduction or whether it's through carbon removal. So, and then that's really now, I think, the final one with regards to carbon credits. And then that is any other factors necessary for primary users of the general purpose financial reports to understand the credibility and integrity of the carbon credits the entity plans to use. Good. Yeah, I think we are now ready for the first poll question of today. And Olga, can I please hand over to you so that you run participants through the first poll question?
Thank you very much, Jens. Let me share the poll presentation. So hopefully everyone can see the slides and the QR code. Wonderful. Thank you for confirming. Just give you a little bit of time to scan or log into dementi.com. Fantastic. Okay, so let's move on to the first question of the day. And it is about what you've just heard on metrics and targets, and also going back to the discussions yesterday. So please share your thoughts, your comments and reflections on the requirements with regards to metrics and targets as it is outlined in the IPSAS SRS ED1. No reflection, no comments so far. Do you think the ask from the IPSASB is reasonable? Would you be able to, if you put your entity or your jurisdiction in the context of preparing disclosures, would you be able to easily find information and establish the targets and the metrics? Okay, identification of metrics is key. Should be a requirement to clearly define methodology, boundary, and emission. Factors used, yeah, that's right. Good comment. More about metrics and targets in developing countries. Metrics can be vague. There's a lot of good comments coming in and interesting implications.
Yes, on that comment around insights for developing countries, I think we would have to see that we are at the early stage of application. So even let's say, more advanced countries are still on their way of implementing climate disclosures. And so therefore, probably let the more developed world make their experience, and then probably then also developing countries can build on experiences that others have made in that context.
Comparability might also be something to consider, as different entities across different countries have different specifics. So targets and metrics will differ. How does this compare across countries and across entities? Maybe that's something to also think about. Too technical and costly. That seems to be a theme coming through. We actually have a question. How different do you think the metrics and targets would be in phase 2? Jens, what do you think about that one?
You know, this is like looking in a crystal ball. That question. So I can't predict at the moment. You know, I would at this stage I cannot give a clear answer on that question. If the participant is interested, I think the December meeting of the IPSASB, which is broadcasted online, then this is probably something to follow. But at this moment, yeah, I think for own operations, it's rather set. But on the public policy programs, I think there is still some discussion around that.
And we actually have another question in the Menti. How does this apply to finance company and compute? Do we have model to compute? So I think there was a question yesterday as well about how does all of this apply to service sector, and this question seems to be related to that rather than you know, more production facility type operation.
Yes. I mean, with I assume with finance company, it is meant that this relates to banking, finance sector. So a little bit looking at that from a public sector side, typically when it comes to banks, finance industry, what I see more also in the public sector is that these entities apply IFRS rather than IPSAS. So they generally would more look into IFRS S1 and S2. And but despite the fact, given the fact that we have an alignment between IPSASB, SRS, ED1, and IFRS S2, so in terms of the methodology and everything, that's pretty much the same. And in terms of the model to compute, so the IPSASB is kind of assuming that the GHG protocol is the applicable framework, but it's called a rebuttable presumption. And so if an entity has good reasons for using any other frameworks, like, for example, as we heard yesterday of the IPCC approach, yeah, that could then probably also be a suitable approach for that. Okay, now I'm seeing a lot of questions are coming in. Olga, maybe back to you. So I have to take one after the other.
Yes, of course. But colleagues, can I just please note, if you have questions, do post them on the Q&A section, just so that we can track them and we can answer them, because they can get lost in the Menti responses. So Jens, shall I read those out and we answer them before moving on to the next
Yeah,
poll?
I
You
think
happy?
it makes sense that we go through those. I think it's two more questions and that we are addressing them. So the first one is, does technical guidance will be developed to help repairers, especially for developing country? So what I can say is the IPSASB is not developing implementation guidance specifically for advanced country or developing countries. So the IPSASB is not making any difference in terms of providing its guidance around specifically for developing countries. So that, at least based on my experience so far with 20 years of IPSASB activity, so there will no specific guidance for developing country. But what has really been increased in recent years is that the IPSASB provides implementation guidance. So the IPSASB even set up an implementation group for sustainability reporting. I mean, one of the suggestions that I can give to that question would be to maybe also get in touch with staff of the IPSASB and reach out whether it is possible to maybe join also this implementation group. So through that, also help can be achieved. And then here on the right-hand side, okay, there is one above. ED1 requires climate target disclosures, but lacks baselines, timelines, or milestones. Should these be included for clarity? Yes, I mean, this is what we clearly heard when we were going through the target disclosure requirements, and without a doubt, baseline needs to be provided. So the year you are measuring against, the timeline, so within what time period you want to achieve, and if there are any milestones that have been set, so to what extent also milestones have been achieved. So that is definitely required by the standard. So that can be answered with a clear yes. Yeah, next. Oh, I see there are more questions coming in. So does hiring external experts recommend? So does hiring external experts, I guess, is recommended or a common practice in calculating metrics and targets? I think again here a little bit would be, we are at the very early stage of the development. I can only share a little bit my private sector experience with sustainability reporting, and that has been with a major car supplier. And yes, at that stage, I was employed in one of the big 4 companies, and at that stage, the car supplier made use of external experts. But to be very honest, I have no clear view on what are the service providers, especially in your region. I'm not aware of, but yeah, I think there are probably channels maybe to go through Asian Development Bank to ask what could be maybe a suitable external expert you can approach with regards to. And I think it's not just metrics and targets. It's maybe also other areas. Yesterday we have been talking about this climate scenario analysis, and that, at least to my understanding, that would also be something where probably external support can be of help. Or when it comes to kind of measuring the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, that is probably also an area where it could make sense to involve someone that is more experienced. Then on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, sorry, there also is that a question: does this disclosure require to get audit, third-party opinion review of disclosures? Does stand give minimum I guess, does the standard give minimum disclosure requirements? Yes. The standard definitely gives minimum disclosure requirements. Yes, that is the case. The standard also does not contain a requirement. So to get your climate disclosure audited. But if you make a statement that your climate disclosures are in compliance with IPSASB SRS 1, if you want to provide assurance on that statements, at that stage, then clearly it is advisable to get a third-party opinion on that. But if you just look into the standard, so there is no statement saying this needs to be audited. But for credibility purposes, I think that is totally something that makes sense. And from a public sector perspective, that could probably something to also be discussed with the state audit institutions. Good. Yeah, quite a lot of questions coming in. So thanks for that. And Olga, now back to you.
Thank you very much. I think it's it's good that we have questions and a lot of comments, and we'll have a few polls today. So keep your thoughts coming in. Let's move on to the next question. That is quite an important one. About data. So you've heard a lot about the disclosures across the 4 pillars, and all of that disclosure will need information collected, processed, analyzed to create those disclosures. So we'd like to know your opinion about how easy it would be to collect the data to prepare those disclosures. So please vote on your devices.
Yeah, it's a tough question, Olga, to say that. Yeah, I mean that reflects a little bit my expectation. So that generally that will be challenging, and also that the capacity issue is something to take into consideration. So yeah, so this is what I have been hearing lately.
Yes, I think we have a very clear leader or 2 leading positions. The need for capacity, but it's good to see that it is possible, although challenging, but it's looking positive when it comes to data collection. Okay, I suggest we move to the next question. So please reflect on, again, the past 2 days, and how do you see the IPSAS SRS requirements as a whole, and share your opinion with us about the requirements. Do you find them easy to understand, easy to implement? Are they relevant? Are they complete? You can move the toggles between strongly agree, strongly disagree, depending on your opinion, for the statements that you see in front of you. it's good to see that the majority do feel that the standard requirements are relevant to their country. That's a good sign. But it seems that implementation is a bit of an issue because the standard is quite complex. Okay, great. I think that seems to be the state of play with regards to IPSAS requirements question. And let's do one more before I pass back to Jens. And again, reflecting overall on the standard and everything that you've heard throughout the past 2 days. Please reflect on whether you agree that IPSAS ED1 with relation to own operations only will be useful for those who use financial and non-financial information that public sector produces. So do you think those requirements will ensure that information will meet the user needs? Because generally we have an agreement.
Yeah, I think when looking at it now, so the IPSASB will be quite pleased to see that outcome of that question.
Okay. I think again we have quite a clear picture here, and it's a very positive one. There is, although there is someone disagreeing, but maybe that participant can leave some comments in the chat, just to reflect on why not. So Jens, I'm passing back to you before our next question section.
Yep. So I'm sharing my screen again, and so we will now go, now that we have heard all the disclosure requirements which would need to provide it when applying the standard. So we now go a little bit more into practice, and our idea was to see what are maybe the experiences with sustainability reporting in the Asia Pacific region. But first, we would like to learn from the experience of the private sector. And ACCA has done a study in the Asia Pac region, and what we would now like to do is to go a little bit into the findings of that study. So the study is called Sustainability Reporting in the Asian Region, an overview of the current developments. And as said, it has been done by ACCA. The study is brand new. It was just published in July 2025. And so my colleague Sidra, she will also paste the link to the study in the chat so that you are able to get the study. And what was the aim of the study? The study wanted to assess the readiness of the Asian jurisdictions for adopting and implementing climate-related and sustainability reporting standards. So that was really the aim of the study. And now, in terms of the first finding and the first issue the study looked at was around the current legal frameworks and the sustainability reporting projects that are going on. And what came out was that most of the Asian countries have voluntary or hybrid sustainability reporting regimes, and that only a few at the moment have really mandatory climate-related disclosures. Then also it was found that frameworks are often sector-specific. So if, for example, for extractives industry or the financial sectors, as I have already mentioned, that's also the case in Europe, that the financial sector, it is highly regulated. And also in the European region, for example, there are specific rules for the financial sector when it comes to sustainability reporting. So what is then missing a little bit is economy-wide frameworks. So that came clearly out. The report also looked at the ongoing national initiatives, and the report found that the initiatives, they aim to align reporting with the international standards. So specifically IPSASB standards. Remember, we are talking at the moment about private sector. TCFD, maybe just remember that TCFD is now also integrated into IPSASB as one. So that's complementary, and entities or initiatives are also making use of the global reporting initiatives standards. As earlier I have said, so GRI had been for a long time the leading framework globally when it came to sustainability reporting. Good, and then also regional bodies, they also promote harmonization, but when looking across different jurisdictions, there are really significant differences between what is going on in the different jurisdictions. Good, now Olga, handing back over to you.
Thank you very much. Jens, before we go on to the polls, there's a question in the Q&A. If we could take a quick look.
Yes, good point. Yes, this question around for Supreme Audit institutions. Now it's saying like Big Four. No, Supreme Audit institution, they are not Big Four. Yeah, so Big Four, it's private firms. Supreme Audit institutions, that's public sector. So then the question is, does it or is it necessary to conduct a sustainability reporting itself? So does the Supreme Audit institution also need to provide sustainability reports? So this is all around the question of the reporting scope that we have discussed yesterday. And in general, yes, Supreme Audit institution, they are a public sector entity. Let's say they fulfill the criteria for a reporting entity under IPSAS. So in generally, we could conclude that Supreme Audit institution, yes, in principle, they should prepare sustainability reports. A little bit, thinking of the, let's say, materiality of Supreme Audit institutions in terms of climate change and so on. So when, for example, when you compare that to other sectors in the public sector, so when you think of energy, when you think of transportation, I think entities working in that area, they probably have a higher impact when it comes to climate. So there is also a question around materiality, but in general, yes, they would also need to prepare. And of course, Supreme Audit institution, yes, as I have already mentioned, they play a role in the assurance process when it comes to sustainability reporting of national governments, local governments, and so on. Good. I think, Olga, with that, I can hand over to you for the poll.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so we'll have a set of questions for you to answer once again, but this time the questions are a little bit more about your specific jurisdiction. So if previously the questions were focused on the standard itself, we would like you to share your thoughts and insight on public sector sustainability reporting in your country. So let's start with the first question, which is around the current legal framework that is in place for public sector sustainability reporting in your country. So is there anything in place right now in terms of legal requirements, laws, voluntary requirements for public sector entities to report sustainability information in any shape and form? So it doesn't have to be official adoption of any particular standard. So maybe there are recommendations that the government has, maybe there are voluntary initiatives, so anything on sustainability reporting.
Olga, can you share your screen? So I think it's still mine.
It is shared. I see answers coming in.
Okay.
Maybe it's taking some time to load. Okay,
let
let me.
No. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Now it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so private sector, definitely there are requirements. Let's keep the focus on public sector. No specific regulations, but it's good to see there is preparation ongoing. If you can also add which country you come from, that would be really of great help. So for example, I see a comment that yes, we have in our country. That'd be great to know where you're from. So which countries are steaming ahead with sustainability reporting for public sector. Roadmap development is underway in another country. No requirements, but state enterprises adopt GRI or TCFD. Okay, wonderful. Keep the comments coming in. Climate expenditure tagging. Okay, so green budgeting techniques are being used. That's great.
Yeah, quite interesting. And you see the landscape of the different approaches in jurisdictions. So private sector is ahead, and now public sector is following suit.
It's also great to see there's a lot of climate related and green public financial management practices, such as sustainable public procurement. There's budget tagging being implemented, which should help with data collection, definitely, for future reporting. Brilliant. I think we're getting some really good insight here. I see quite a lot of initiatives happening in the Philippines with tagging and regulatory developments as well.
Yeah.
PFM and transparency in Bhutan. Yep.
Yeah. So we do also see this term of tagging, and we have to keep in mind that is something that is mainly driven by the budgeting function. So to classify government expenditure with certain tagging, so that you are able to see, in what areas government spends funds, and how, let's say, how green is the budget. So that is complementary to what we discuss in terms of sustainability reporting.
Okay, I think we have a very good view. Let's move on to the next poll question. It relates to the previous question, and in some ways, some of the comments have already been made. But let's take a vote on whether there are any sustainability standards or frameworks being used by public sector entities in your country. And again, mandatory or voluntary. In the previous slide, there were comments that state-owned corporations use GRI and TCFD. So please vote in this poll and include your answer here. So we're looking at any public sector entity.
Yeah.
Okay, first is 1 is 2. I'm guessing that will probably be SOEs. Let's give it a little bit more time for everyone to answer. Okay, so I think, yes, generally there's no frameworks in place as we have seen from the previous question, but it's interesting also to see there's cases where the mix of standards are being used. I think that indicates, fragmentation of the reporting landscape. Hopefully IPSAS SRS will structure it when it does come out in end of year 2026.
Yeah, that will certainly increase then also pressure to move in that direction. So I know of entities really waiting for the IPSASB to come out with its guidance. Yeah.
Okay, let's do one more. I think we have probably most of the votes in. Okay, let's also reflect on what does adoption of IPSAS SRS mean? Do you see it as something that will take your jurisdiction towards sustainable development, greater transparency in the public sector? Will it help to address climate change issues? So for each of the statements that you see, please move the toggle between strongly agree and strongly disagree, so we can get the feel of the purpose that you see in the adoption of IPSASB SRS. Okay, I think we have some positive views that IPSASB SRS is going to help to address climate change. It is going to inform decision making, support accountability, transparency, possibly an additional burden.
Yeah.
I think this is a very good outcome that we're seeing.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. I think IPSASB will be happy once again to see this.
Yes.
And let's do
one more.
Yeah, one more before continuing. So this is a big one. Do you see your country adopting IPSASB SRS? So after having heard all about the standard and the requirements, do you think that your country would adopt this the standard, and would it be a direct adoption or adapted to the context, or not at all? Possibly another framework rather than the IPSASB standard. I think this is quite clear cut.
Yep, good outcome. Yeah.
I think it makes sense that the standard will be adapted to country context, as every country has its own risks and opportunities. But I think, yeah, that's also a very positive view.
Yes, this is also what we have experienced when it comes to the accrual basis IPSAS, that entities rather adapt than just adopt as the IPSAS are. So that clearly reflects now here the outcomes that experience.
Brilliant. I think we have most of the votes in. Jens, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, let me continue with the results of the study. And the study also looked at the applicability and the usefulness of climate-related reporting standards in the region. And the study found that the global standards, so IPSASB, TCFD, they were considered as relevant and broadly applicable to the Asian context. The benefits that were highlighted by the participants of the study were saying, yes, those standards, they contribute to comparability, they increase investor confidence, and they also contribute in improving risk management of companies. Interesting now for you is maybe to hear about the challenges that the entities have seen. So one of the things is the contextual adaptation needed for local economies. So a little bit just what we heard from the poll. So, what should be adapted to local needs? And there is always discussions around that based on my experience. That also SMEs, so smaller and medium-sized entities, of course, given the large volume and the sometimes quite extensive disclosure requirements, that is especially seen by the smaller and medium entities more of a burden, and sometimes they are a little bit overwhelmed, the SMEs. And I just can share from a European perspective, there it has been a specific approach for smaller and medium-sized entities in terms of sustainability reporting. And then also around what do the state-owned enterprises need to do? Should they follow IPSASB? Should they follow what IPSAS are doing? So I think at the moment there is a little bit of a time where it needs to be seen what is the appropriate framework for the SOEs. And as already said, yes, some standards, they were really viewed as resource intensive for smaller entities. So this resource capacity issue, that is clearly what we see also in the private sector. Good. The second or the third aspect that was looked into the study were around the institutional and the capacity challenges for the standard adoption, implementation, and enforcement. And similar to some questions that we have heard today, also in the private sector, it was found so limited technical expertise among regulators, preparers, and auditors. So all involved in the let's say in the finance value chain, they have to learn about the new requirements and the new mechanisms. And it's not only in the public sector, that is also seen in the private sector. Yeah, then data gaps on emissions, climate risks, and value chain impacts, they hinder compliance. So all the issues around data, and I think we discussed that also within one of the polls we already had. Then sometimes what was seen in practice was fragmented institutional responsibility. And given the fact, Ministry of Environment, for example, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy, they are all involved in that. And all of the ministry, they have to coordinate also standard setters in the area, regulators when it comes to auditing. I mean, they all have to work closely together, and that can also slow down developments. Then the enforcement mechanisms, they are often weak or underdeveloped, and often there is high reliance on market pressure to do that. And also, of course, of international developments. So the pressure is not only within a country, that's also coming from outside. Then, of course, capacity building programs, they exist, but also it was said that they remain insufficient. So even for the private sector. Good, Olga. I think now the next round of polls comes into place.
Yes, we have a couple of more questions for you. So hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can see the screen. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for confirming. Okay, so the first question, as Ian's just been mentioning challenges, I would like to ask you, what challenges do you see in adopting IPSASB SRS or another framework in your country? Where do you think the problems might arise? What will be difficult? Please vote. You can pick several options. Data and resources are coming through as the leading topics at the moment. So resources seems to be the most challenging area, with data has caught up. We also love to hear you share your comments, so please do come off mute and tell us more. Maybe reflect on what specific resources you feel might be limiting, any specific areas of data collection. Would love to hear you share more deeper insights with us. So, or post in the comments if you don't feel like speaking, but we'd love to hear you. It's good to see that IT systems are not as much of a challenge as other areas. I think that contrasts to my experience, where fragmented systems with data in different systems across entities, and then it becomes very difficult to collect and aggregate and create a consistent, wholesome picture. But it's good to see that this is not an issue so much in the region compared to other areas. Okay. I think we have most of the votes in. Let's move on to the next poll. So what capacity gaps do you see that might impede IPSASB SRS adoption in your country? So previously, on the previous slide, we talked about challenges across all the areas, but let's zoom into capacity, so human resource skills and training. You can select and rank the options that you see on your devices. Okay, that's an interesting view. Okay, lack of awareness is moving down. Lack of skilled professionals, lack of skills of existing professions are leading.
Yeah, I think in terms of awareness, Olga, we are doing at the moment our best.
Yes.
to make people aware.
Keep your votes coming in. Okay, I think that this looks like more or less the final picture. And lack of awareness is back to top. So I think I think more sessions are needed to spread awareness about the importance of sustainability. Please also add your thoughts to the comments, just to give us a little bit more insight of possibly what you mean, what kind of activities could be useful to raise awareness. Okay. I think this seems to be the final ranking. All right. I think this gives us a good understanding of what's needed. Thank you very much for your comments. Jens, I'll pass back to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Olga, for running the poll. So going back to the presentation, so with regards to the first study, I think we have just one slide. Yeah, we have just one slide left. So, and the last issue covered in the study was the question around what are the existing foundations and what are frameworks considered. And historically, corporate governance codes were already oftentimes in place. So there was already something going into the direction of sustainability, but corporate governance codes, they were just, let's say, the starting point for that. Then also was found in the study, so stock exchange listing rules in several countries, they either require or encourage ESG disclosure. So there we see the push from capital markets for sustainability reporting, and kind of regional cooperation platforms like Asian Capital Markets Forum, they can also serve as integration channels, exchanging experiences, sharing best practices, and so on. That's certainly something that regional cooperation platforms can do. And then also, if entities, of course, had already prior experience with voluntary reporting frameworks, just as GRI or CDP, that really provided a good knowledge base for the transition to other mandatory climate-related standards. So that reflects a little bit my experience that I made in the private sector, that when an entity already was doing sustainability reporting, then the shift of a new framework is much easier than if you really start from scratch. Good. I think now we are through with the findings of the study. Olga, handing over to you to run 2 more polls, and then probably I suggest maybe then having after the poll maybe 10 minutes of break, and then we have around 15 minutes, 20 minutes then for the final round.
Thank you, Jens. Hopefully you can see the poll slides.
Yeah, now
Great.
we can see.
Great. Wonderful. 2 more questions for today. Let's start with the first. And what do you think are the main drivers for adopting sustainability reporting in your country, whether it's IPSASB SRS or another reporting framework? Why do you think it's important? What drives the adoption? You can rank the available options at the moment, national development plans or international commitments are leading reasons. Keep your eyes coming in. Okay, I think we have a good, oh, we have a good stable picture
Yeah.
right now. So national, international commitments and plans underpinned by climate change, climate risks, are driving sustainability reporting framework adoption. And I think it rings true with one of the previous questions about what adoption means for each country. It means the ability to deal with climate-related events, with climate change, and further sustainable development. So I think this ties in very well to the previous questions. Okay. One more question, the last one for today. Who will be the key users of the reports produced in your country? So who will use this information once, whether it's IPSASB SRS or another framework is adopted and the reports are produced? Who are they for? Who will they be aimed at? Please type your answers, and you can share more than one option if that's relevant. Public government shareholders. Okay, so I think the public and the government are coming through as the key stakeholders. Okay, so I think we see that the public and citizens, and also if we look at the different variations of the wording, the public and the government will be the key users, the key interested parties in their reports, which I think it's quite, that makes sense, and it's quite an expected outcome.
Yeah, but not underestimate investors. So yeah, these are also not the primary, but they are also definitely within the scope.
I think they're coming through as well. Investors,
Yeah.
donors, I see as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Brilliant. I think we have a good response rate. I'll keep the poll running in the background, just in case, and I'll pass over to you, Jens.
Yes. So I suggest now that we take a 10 minutes break, as some of the participants suggested to have a 10-minute break. Yes, let's do now 10 minutes of break. So we come back 2:35 Manila time. So in about 10 minutes. Okay, see you soon again. And then we will touch on the experience of the City of Toronto in terms of sustainability reporting. So, hello everyone, welcome back. As said, we will now look at the case study on sustainability reporting in the public sector. And also there was a study done by ACCA on looking at the city of Toronto and their experiences in terms of sustainability reporting. To be very honest, I have been a little bit involved in that study. So really proud to see that this study has been published, but that was at a time when I worked elsewhere. So the study was published in June 2024. The context for you to know, the city of Toronto, that's the largest Canadian city. It has about 2.8 million residents, and the city itself has an annual operating budget of 16 billion Canadian dollars. Yeah, what was the purpose of the case study? The case study aimed to illustrate how a major municipality adopted sustainability reporting to align their financial and climate-related disclosures, how they enhance accountability, and how this is done to attract investment. So that were the main purposes that were followed when conducting the study. The approach that the city of Toronto took was that they issued their first ESG report in 2020 based on the TCFD framework. And what they also managed was integrating the TCFD framework into the city's governance and financial reporting processes. So that was quite an achievement that the city went through. And you will see about them, their experience in a minute. The situation when they started off was like there was no really public sector specific sustainability standards. So, you know, they had to decide on one of the available frameworks. And at the time, there were mainly frameworks focused on private sector, so like GRI, TCFD, and so on. And the city decided to move on with the TCFD framework. And what they also did was to integrate their climate-related financial disclosures in its annual financial reports. What is important to note that the initiative was really led by, on the one side, the Environment and Climate Division, but also spearheaded by the CFO of the city of Toronto. And she was really pushing for it. And I think it can be said that it was finance who was then able to bring sustainability reporting into the annual financial reports. But it couldn't happen without the support of the Environment and the Climate Division. Why? You will see in a minute. The issue we looked at was also applicability and usefulness of climate-related reporting standards in the region. And so based on the interview we had with the CFO of the city, it was confirmed that TCFD actually proved as a practical and relevant framework for a large municipal context. Also, the focus on climate change allowed direct linkage between sustainability and financial reporting. So we heard about IPSASB SRS1, about this connected information that was also kind of confirmed by the city of Toronto. And also the TCFD allowed reporting, and the reporting supported risk management and also improved accountability for climate-related commitments. So in summary, the climate-related reporting helped really secure favorable financing in terms of sustainability bonds, and also enhanced the city's credit ratings. So there was a clear connect between, on the one side, the climate-related reporting, and on the other hand side, the financial side. Good. When it comes to challenges, and now you will see a little bit why that has also been an issue for the finance department. So whereas the Environment and Climate Division, they had approximately 24 staff, the CFO's office had only 2 dedicated staff to handle that. So therefore, there was quite a clear lack of resources, at least on the finance side. It turned out, based on what we heard, was that change management and also stakeholder buy-in, for example, by the mayor, those stakeholder buy-in, that was quite crucial for the success of the project. It turned out that some of the stakeholders of the city, they resisted that kind of reporting because they wanted to avoid having that transparency. So there were some resistance within the administration, and which the involved stakeholders or the involved project leaders had to overcome. Then the materiality assessment, that was complex because so when you look at the services that a city provides, you can say it has a really wide remit, and you have multiple service areas. So therefore, it's sometimes difficult to really identify which are the topics which are of material relevance for this entity. And also a little bit what we discussed during the last 2 days or 3 days was this issue around data consistency. And that was also found during the project by the City of Toronto, so that many departments had issues around data consistency and also having the appropriate data sources to provide relevant information. Good. Yeah, what were the existing foundations and frameworks for adoption? So the City of Toronto had already a pre-existing net zero commitment, so that certainly helped in terms of the sustainability reporting journey. So there was already a kind of a target, so to say. Then also carbon footprint measurement was already there, and also the 21 billion sustainability investment plan that the city had was certainly helpful for undertaking that project. Then also we were told that there was strong political and also executive commitment, especially from the mayor, but also from CFO, and she led that project. Then what was also helpful was the experience from previous sustainability-related initiatives and certifications. And it was mentioned to us that the ISO 37120, that this was something that they had already implemented. And when they implemented TCFD and the reporting framework, the ISO standard was already implemented, was quite helpful then for then coming up with a sustainability report. Good. And finally, the established sustainable finance framework that was in place that then facilitated the green and social bond issuance of the city. Good. And with that, I think we are through. So thanks for your engagement, for your participation. Yeah, it has been, at least from our team, a great pleasure to have these workshops with you and to discuss this important topic. And yeah, let's make sure to continue on that journey. So yeah, for the moment, and let me check. Yeah, and I'm hand over now to Sejo Buentaran, so Assistant Controller of ADB, and he will close the program for us. So over to you, Sejo.
Thank you, Jens. So as we're wrapping up this final day of the 3-day workshop, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody for the active participation and valuable contributions. All of your involvements has made this workshop a success. Just a reminder that this is just the start of our journey towards sustainability reporting. Any knowledge and insights we've gained over the past 3 days are should be used as foundation for our future efforts. Also, implementing this sustainability reporting it's not just a one-time task, right? It's an ongoing commitment towards transparency, accountability, and continuous improvements. So let's keep working together, sharing experiences, and then striving towards excellence in sustainability reporting. Just a reminder, also, please, we request that you take a moment to fill out the post-event survey. Your feedback is really important for us and it will help us understand your views on sustainability reporting better. It also will allow us to continue to meet your needs and expectations in the future. Lastly, I want to give a special thanks to the ACCA, especially Jens, Olga, Sharif, and Sidra, as well as my colleagues, the ADB team working behind the scenes. Their efforts have been crucial in making this workshop possible. On behalf of ADB, thank you once again, and we look forward to your continued engagement in sustainability reporting in the future. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.